Dagda of August Fáilte. Hello and welcome. It's me, Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School again. And as part of our 90-day challenge, we're still trying to roll through with turning up on the YouTube for regular content. And so one thing I love about this platform is all of the amazing comments that we're receiving and the responses that we're getting. As an individual who suffers with low self-esteem and challenges at times, hearing that the stories have an impact, hearing that some of the content is inspiring or is comforting to understand that other people on a similar pagan path have similar experiences is very reassuring. And to all of you, Gurav Mahagas, thank you very, very much. So if you're enjoying the videos, do make sure you're hitting the like, the subscribe, and the bell for notifications, because that way you won't miss out on them, especially if you've asked a question. And this is one thing I absolutely love. If you've caught some of my videos before, you will probably understand that I'm a person who loves a good question. I will have all of the time, as much as I can spare, for a good question, because it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to experience something from another person's perspective. You know, someone asks a question about a particular part of lore, a particular part of history, a particular part of cultural kind of influence, or like Irish kind of nature or spirituality, the Irish landscape. All of these kind of things give me an insight into their perspective and allow me then to follow my own thoughts, to kind of take time to experience, and not even to have an answer. It's not about answering every question. It's sometimes about exploring and understanding the knowledge and truth that can come from following the thought of a good question. So speaking of a good question, the topic, you may have seen it at the top end there, is who is the Irish god of love? And this was asked in one of our kind of comments on this YouTube series, and I dived on it because if we were to give it a full title, it would be, who is the Irish god of love? And why do people always think it's Aengus Óg? So for those of you who may or may not know, Aengus Óg or Aengus Óg is known as Aengus the young son. He is the son of Dagda, the Dagda Moor, and Boann, the goddess who is linked with the Newgrange River Boyne Valley. And in fact, the name, the River Boyne, is named after Boann. So not to get into it too much, I could do an entire video just on Aengus. If you're interested in a video just on Aengus, do let me know in the comments. But first things first really is this idea of the god of. It doesn't really fit in the Irish culture, in the Irish pantheon, in the Irish history. Now, there are many different deities in the polytheistic pantheon of the Tuatha Dé Danann and outside the Tuatha Dé Danann, because there are gods who don't fall into that particular tribe. Like Monaghan Mac Lir, for instance, he's not one of the Tuatha Dé Danann, but he is linked as one of the deities. Even Lir himself, we've lost a lot of information on Lir, because Monaghan Mac Lir is Monaghan, son of Lir, and Lir is the sea. So Monaghan is son of the sea, but Lir is this name for this elemental god maybe, but we don't have any more information on him, which is frustrating. You know, yes, I am one of those people who still mourns the loss of the Library of Alexandria, like one of the 8 wonders of the mythological world, or of the ancient world, because of the loss of all the lore, the knowledge, the information. So yes, that is me. So anyway, back to the point. Aengus Óg, he is linked with this idea, with this concept of love. And, you know, though Irish kind of gods have many different facets, many different ways, they're not pigeonholed in the same way as some other deities and some other pantheons. Like if you look at the Greek and Roman pantheons, you have, you know, Aphrodite or Venus, goddess of love or beauty. You know, you have Athena, goddess of wisdom. You know, you have Hephaestus, god of the smith and the forging. So though we have Gwivnu, who is one of the 3 craftsmen, a god of smithing and blacksmithing and forging, you know, it's not his only kind of capability in the same way. And much like, you know, Hephaestus has so many other aspects to him as a god. But again, let's not fall into tangents here. The thing is, though, we have to look back. Where does this concept come from? Where does this idea come from? And it is exterior influences coming in and viewing these Irish gods, these and all of the Celtic gods in very many ways. And by Celtic, we don't mean a Celtic bloodline, a Celtic nation. We're talking about people who come from the same root origins of a Celtic language. So we have to look at Julius Caesar. Yes, that Julius Caesar of the Roman emperors, the first emperor, the first Caesar. Julius was rocking around conquering most of Europe, as you do when you're kind of like, dominating and running an imperialist colonial, empire, literally. So he's also writing a lot. That's one thing we're grateful to Julius for. All Jules rocking around, he's also documenting a lot of information and his perspective and his view on it. And it's him who refers to this idea of this pater, or this kind of great father or sky father, because that's how he attributes Jupiter, his kind of lead god, with this idea. And to him, then it's ideas like Hermes, Apollo, like all of these other kind of gods, and how they fit a certain narrative or fit a certain kind of requirement of spiritual practice, of spiritual life. And so as he's looking into these other cultures, invariably he's trying to rationalize it against his own understanding of spirituality, which makes a lot of sense. But we have to then also make allowances for the fact that he could be wrong. And so he's looking at this idea of, for example, a sun god, a sun deity, and that's where people begin to take it far too literally, far too seriously. And so every pantheon must have a sun deity. So let's find the one who is mentioned or linked with the sun, and then you end up with something like Lu being referred to as a sun god when he's not. What it says in the story is that he is sun-faced. He's just so beautiful looking. He's such a good-looking lad that the sun shines out of his face. That doesn't mean he's a literal sun god. Especially when we look at the culture, I talked about in the video being a bard. If you haven't seen that one, go and watch it. Allegory was a big thing, the whole way of telling a story, way of kind of describing something in an intelligent way, in a different way, in a unique way that would intimate, that would kind of like, bring someone into an understanding of something, or in many cases be an inside joke, So that is an element here as well. We can't always take things as literal as, well, this person talks about love, so they're obviously a love god. If you want to take it as literally as that, then, the Morrigan has sex that one time in that one story with the Dagda, so she's a sex goddess. No. Just no. The Morrigan is not a sex goddess. I'm sorry. I've made this argument before in groups, but essentially, it's like turning around to someone who has sex and says, oh, you had sex at one time, you're obviously a sex worker. It's not the same thing. Also, we at the Irish Pagan School support sex workers. It is an industry. It is something that needs to be regulated, supported, and protected. So we want to have a very clear stance on that as well. Back on track, John. Get it back on track. We're talking about love. All right. So why do people think it's Aengus MacIndoe? It is because of common themes in stories. So briefly, Aengus is this young son of the Dagda and Boann. He is conceived and born all in one day. Different story for different time. But a lot of the other stories, actually, that story comes from a particular tale called The Wooing of a Taun. And it's in this narrative that we find out the origins of Aengus. But we also find out his origins as he takes his rightful place, as he grows up to become, recognized by his father, the Dagda, who is king in Ireland at this point. I mentioned in a previous video how I met the Dagda. He was king for 80 years in Ireland. And so when Aengus grows up, he goes to his dad and he's like, I need to be recognized. I need land that should be mine, and wealth that should be mine. And that's how Aengus takes over Brú na Bóinne. Different story for a different time. But during that tale, The Wooing of a Taun, Midder, Angus's foster father, comes to him and asks for him to broker an arrangement with the most beautiful woman in Ireland at the time, which is a Taun. And so Aengus ends up as this go-between, as this matchmaker between Midder making these offerings and overtures to a Taun and to a Taun's father in many cases to try and bring the union together. Of course, it's many, many labors put upon by Angus's promises. He promises Aton's dad, that like, oh yeah, I'll totally clear that forest for you and make it a new plain. And then he goes to his own dad, the Dagda. He's like, oh no, I made this promise, then I can't do it. And Dagda's like, fine. And he clears an entire forest in one night and makes a new plain. And then Aengus knows and makes another promise. And Aton's dad is like, well, I can't give up my daughter unless my new plain is irrigated properly for agriculture. Aengus, yeah, of course, I'll take care of that. And he goes to his dad, the Dagda, and is like, oh no. And so Dagda, in another night, pulls out the rivers to make this plain very fertile and irrigated. You see what it is? I've talked about myself being a Dagda bard, a Dagda storyteller. It invariably does come around that some way all of these stuffs interlinks. But this wooing of Aton, this relationship, this matchmaking story, that's one of the narratives, one of the themes that does link Aengus to this idea of love, to this concept of love and relationship. So it's not unbelievable that he will be linked to that, but that doesn't make him the god of love. He's not like the literal god of Cupid dropping arrows of love on people. It is just one of these narratives where he plays matchmaker. And in fact, that story, if you haven't read it, The Wooing of Aton, is a tragedy. It doesn't have a happy ending for Midor or for Aton. If you're interested in that full one, let me know. We can kind of look and do a video on that too. But that's not the only time that we see Aengus linked with this idea of love. There's two other big narratives that we can pull out and point to as references to why people looking at this believe or attribute Aengus to this role of love. And the other one is called Aisling Aengusa, which is the dream of Aengus. This is a beautiful story, and the translation I most prefer is done by Morrigan Daimler. They have a blog called Living Liminally. I'll probably kind of pull that up and link it down below. But they also have done many, many more books through the Pagan Portal series. And they're just brilliant. They just really, really are. But they've done a translation of this Aisling Aengusa, and it's one of their favorite stories. And in it, Aengus takes sick because he's having these dreams every night. And in these dreams, he's seeing this very beautiful woman, and she keeps coming to him in these dreams. And, sometimes she's just there passing by. Sometimes he sees her in various places. Sometimes she actually brings a musical instrument and she plays and she sings, and he is smitten. He is enraptured with this woman that he's never met before in real life. And so he actually begins to fail. He begins to grow significantly ill and to weaken because of this his love sickness he has upon him for this woman of his dreams. And so he goes, Boann, his mom, figures out, hold on, Aengus is not right. And so she calls in the druids. The druid goes, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here. He pretty much has a love sickness on him and he hasn't told anyone about it. And so the druid kind of gets Aengus to open up about it. And Aengus is like, I don't know who she is. I've never seen her before. I've never met her before, but she is all I can think about. And she is all that is in my dreams. And so they contact, Fintan is the druid, and he's like, Boann, do you know this woman? Here's the description. And she's like, no, I don't. And he's like, okay, well, what do we do? And Fintan's like, well, can we go ask the king? Can we go ask Dagda? And they go ask the Dagda, and the Dagda's like, what are you asking me for? Boann knows everything I know. So why are you bothering me about this? If she doesn't know him, I don't know who this woman is. Which is a lovely kind of show of balance in their relationship as well. That, the Dagda isn't, oh no, I'm better than Boann. He's like, what are you asking me for? His mom knows as many people in Ireland as I do. But then Fintan's like, listen, we actually need you in your other role as an authority figure amongst the other crowd, the people of the Hollow Hills. And so Dagda goes as this intermediary to the various kings of the Sidhe around Ireland, and he finds out then that this dream woman of Aengus is one of the daughters of a Sidhe king. And essentially, they have to go through, there's a negotiation, there's an arrangement to try and find out her name, to try and find out where she is. And there's a whole kind of story that runs around that as well. Again, all of these stories are very beautiful, very involved, and very epic. But eventually they find out, and Aengus manages to, he has to kind of creep up. He's like, he can't be announced. There's no formal kind of courtship because even this king amongst the Sidhe has no authority to offer this woman. He has no kind of like position or power to say that this is a relationship that has to happen. He can't broker an arrangement. All he can do is give the name and tell Aengus where she's going to be. And so Aengus kind of comes and she's kind of singing in front of this lake, and they meet each other in real life for the first time, and they do actually fall in love. The great story says then that they turn themselves into swans, and because she could turn herself into a swan, which is why he could never find her, because she was shape-shifting all the time and flying all over the place. And so when he says, listen, it's time for me to go, she shapeshifts into a swan, and Aengus is like, well, you're not going without me. And so he shapeshifts into a swan. And so they travel then, and then they have these cycles where they're swans together, and then when they live together. So again, it's one of those lovely, beautiful, romantic stories. And this one does have a happy ending. There's one other tale. There's one other story where we find Aengus linked to this idea of relationships. And it is, unfortunately, another tragedy. Ireland's sagas has many, many tragedies, and this one is the pursuit of Diarmid and Grania. Now, we're moving through time here, just from an archaeological standpoint, from a historical standpoint. A lot of the stories that we have come from these 11th century texts, like the Book of Kells, the Yellow Book of Lecan, the Book of Fermoy, all these big manuscripts that were written down by early Christian monasteries. They were writing down their own history, their own lore in these tomes, but they were also collecting and collating the stories, the oral tradition stories of their areas, which is why we have to give them props for that. And so we have these tomes that we can carbon date to 11th century, but we know they're older because the language is 9th century. We also know that there was a practice in these monasteries of, as the work begins to fade, it will just be transcribed into a new work to make sure the story was carried on, to make sure the letter was maintained. And so we have some of the oldest stories are referred to as the mythological cycle. So that's where you're dealing predominantly with the Tuatha Dé Danann, their arrival into Ireland, them as gods. So the wooing of the Tán and Aisling Aengus fall within that era, fall within that body of work, which we refer to as the mythological era. But after that, we then have the more kind of, well, not more modern, more recent from that is the two great cycles known as the Ulster cycle and the Fenian cycle. So the Ulster cycle is all of the Cuchulainn, Satanta, all of the Queen Maeve, Tán, the Tá Bó Cúailnge, Tá Bó Raibhne, the Flad Vricran, the Feast of Bricrú, all of that is Ulster cycle. But then we have the Fenian cycle where we're talking about Fionn McCool and Fionn and the Fianna, and we have Cormac MacArt being king in Ireland at the time. And it's all of the stories of boyhood Fionn growing up, becoming the hero. And as with a lot of these tales, though, either you die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain. And in this, the tragedy called The Pursuit of Diarmid and Grania, we actually find hero Fionn as an elderly guy now, and he's not the good guy in this story. I don't know if there is a good guy in the story, if maybe it's Diarmid, the tragedy that is Diarmid. But I won't go into the full story because that would take us a whole extra amount of time. If you're interested in Diarmid and Grania, let me know and we can kind of do a video on that, because I want to, connect with you on what you're interested in, not just tell you what I'm interested in. So the pursuit of Diarmid and Grania, anyway, where is Aengus in this story? Cliff notes, top down stuff. Grania is in Tara. Old Fionn McCool. Fionn has lost his wife. He's looking for a new maiden, a young wife. She's like, he's old enough to make me. No thanks. But by the way, one of his warriors, that guy in the Fianna, he's absolutely brilliant. I'd love him. And so Grania falls for Diarmid, but Diarmid is loyal to Fionn, and Diarmid is like, I'm sorry, there's some other arrangement here. And Grania is like, it's you or nothing. And so they kind of elope together and they're on the run. The whole saga, the tale is them fleeing and being pursued by Fionn and his Fianna. But during the story, we find Aengus. And at parts during the tale, Diarmid and Grania climb atop dolmens. Now, a dolmen is it's a structure of stones. It's usually 3, maybe more stones, 2 of them placed in an upright, and then a larger stone placed on top of them as a capstone. And so you can see them dotted all around Ireland. They're quite a common feature. So few of them, though, are still upright and erect. But it was said that Diarmid and Grania would sleep on top of these dolmens. that they would actually climb up on top of them to be away from the grass and the wet. And what was happening was, as Fionn and his Fianna were closing on them, Diarmaid and Gráinne would fall asleep on top of one dolmen and they'd wake up on top of another one miles away, because Diarmaid was being protected by his foster father, who was Aengus MacIndóg. So here at this point, we have the third kind of connection between Aengus and love and relationships. And so it's Aengus in the wooing of Táin being this brokerage, this kind of go-between to try and make right with Midr for an incident that happened in his land, by bringing Midr and Táin together. Then we have Aengus's own kind of passion and his own kind of connection with this woman of his dreams, the love of his life. And then we have him showing this care and compassion for eloping lovers kind of running together to flee from harm, danger, oppression of Fionn. So these are the three kind of main stories where we see Aengus linked to this theme of love. But that's not the only thing that we see Aengus linked to. He's also linked with this cycle of day and night, because when he takes Newgrange, it's by manipulating the language of a promise into day and night. He's linked with his father through sovereignty, judgment, right judgment, and kingship, but he's linked with his mother through land and connection and bounty and wisdom through the river. So there's lots of different aspects to Aengus MacIndóg. There's lots to kind of connect with him on, not just the aspect of love. And so I think it's very important to be aware that in the Irish tradition, there isn't just, here's the god of death, here's the god of love, here's the god of this, here's the god of that. Many of the Irish gods have multiple different in-depth, detailed, multifaceted kind of responsibilities and relationships in so many different ways. Trust me, I'm a Dagda guy. He can do, if you saw my How I Met the Dagda video, I was literally wearing a t-shirt that says, I'm not good, I'm good at it. He is good at everything. He is one of the few gods. Him and Lugh are pretty much the only two gods who can turn their hand to anything and everything and be good at it. So different talks for a different day. We'll do a video on Lugh if you're interested. Let me know. But yeah, as far as Aengus goes, people kind of connect him with this idea of love. But it's not just love. There is those three main stories that I've talked about, and it is something to be aware of, that you can talk to any of the deities about relationship. You can talk to any of the deities about your heart stuff, about love stuff. Some of them might be more responsive than others. If you're talking about needing healthy emotional balance, I've talked about that in a previous video with the Dagda. He gets it. He understands it. He is a person who has had other relationships as well. Like, he is a wedded partner of the Morrigan, but, he has a relationship with Boann, and they bring forth Aengus MacOg. He has many other children, not like at no point does it say that the Morrigan brought his forth children. So they could be children from other relationships. And that's part of the cultural narrative of that time. But you can talk to him about relationship. You can talk to him about your heart stuff. You could talk to Aengus about it. If you're looking for justice and balance within a relationship, you could talk to Maeve about it. If you're looking for respectful boundaries in relationships, you could talk to the Morrigan about it. Point of note, though, the Morrigan is not a love goddess either. Like, the Morrigan is more a manifestation of change. And if you need change, or if you need kind of personal sovereignty and strength in that, then that's how I would approach a dialogue around that with the Morrigan personally. Again, I don't work for her, if you've seen the first video, but she has my love and she has my respect. So I think that you don't just talk to a particular Irish god for a particular thing. It's not just a case of, who do I need to talk to today? Let me just talk to you for this, talk to you for that. If you build this idea that we have in the Irish Pagan School of a right relationship, this core quiveness, where you get to know the god that you're working with, you get to know the deity, and they become a close friendship. They become a close partnership, or even a working partnership if it's that, so you then build up this kind of ongoing practice with a god. And you can communicate with them, you can connect with them on more than just one particular aspect of things. So some people might find it easiest just to say, okay, well, Aengus knows a bit about love because he's been lovesick himself, he knows about matchmaking people, he knows about protecting eloping relationships, you can communicate with him effectively in that way. But it doesn't just pigeonhole him into this category as the Irish god of love. So I hope this has answered the question. I hope it's been insightful and interesting, as it was for me. As soon as the question came in, I was like, I want to do that one. I have these stories. I know what way I would like to present that information. And I hope it's been interesting to you. I hope it's been engaging. I hope you've kind of enjoyed it. And I hope you will hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications, because if you throw a question down in the comments, your question might be the one that we answer next. And you don't want to miss out on an answer like that, do you? So just make sure you're getting the notifications. All right. So from myself here and my partner Laura at the Irish Pagan School, we will say once again, Gurav Mahagas, thank you very, very much. And until next time, look after yourself, take care of yourself, and so on. Goodbye.